No one expected what was about to happen when Whoopi Goldberg tried to humiliate Mel Gibson on live television, but they had no idea what was coming next. It was a packed studio at The View, the iconic roundtable of daytime drama and political hot takes. Cameras rolled, the audience buzzed with anticipation, and Twitter was already lighting up with hashtags like Mel on The View and Gibson vs Goldberg. The energy was electric. Everyone sensed something explosive was about to unfold. At tea. The center of it all sat Whoopi Goldberg, veteran actress, unapologetic firebrand, and the show's unshakable matriarch. She leaned back in her chair, smug and poised, her eyes locked on her target like a hawk circling prey. Opposite her was Mel Gibson, the polarizing director and actor many had counted out years ago. But today, he wasn't here to apologize. He was here to reclaim something deeper, his integrity, long buried beneath headlines and Hollywood hypocrisy. To Whoopi, he represented everything wrong with old Hollywood. To Mel, The View was ground zero for media moralism gone mad. The topic? Cancel culture, redemption, and who really gets to decide when someone is forgiven. And the moment Mel opened his mouth, the entire room shifted. The moment Mel settled into his chair, Whoopi wasted no time sharpening her claws. She crossed her arms, voice dripping with sarcasm. So Mel, tell me, is this the part where you find God again, or is this another reboot to sell movie tickets? A few audience members chuckled nervously. The other co-hosts exchanged knowing glances, ready for a takedown. Mel blinked. Slowly, no smile, no flinch, just a pause. Whoopi leaned in. You've said some pretty vile things in the past, racial slurs, anti-Semitic rants, drunken tirades. And now you want us to believe you're here to talk about truth. Really? The audience stiffened. A few gasps. One woman in the second row folded her arms, unsure whether to cheer or cringe. Mel adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. Still silent. Whoopi, wasn't done. You disappeared for years and now suddenly you're back with another war movie. You say you're about integrity, but where was that when you were caught screaming at your ex on tape? Mel's eyes locked with hers. Calm, piercing, controlled. So I'll ask again, Whoopi said, raising her brow. Why should anyone listen to you? Silence. Even Joy Behar looked slightly uncomfortable. Mel finally leaned forward, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. Because I'm still standing, he said, his voice low and deliberate, and I'm not hiding behind cue cards and applause signs. Murmurs rippled through the audience. He turned slightly toward the crowd, not ignoring Whoopi, but elevating above her. You can bring up every mistake I've ever made. I won't deny them. I won't deflect them. I own them. But the question isn't what I said 15 years ago. The question is whether redemption is real. Or is it only reserved for the people you like? The crowd began to shift. A few nodded. Someone clapped once quietly. Whoopi tilted her head, annoyed. Redemption has to be earned, Mel. You don't just show up and expect people to forget. He nodded. You're right. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's recognizing growth. He leaned in, eyes sharp. And if we're going to talk about words, Whoopi, you once defended a man who pled guilty to sexually assaulting a child. You called it not rape. So maybe we both have things we regret. The audience gasped. Joy's eyes widened. Ana Navarro dropped her pen. Whoopi's expression froze. For a moment, the queen of daytime was speechless. Mel didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He just sat there, grounded, unapologetically present. I'm not here to win your approval, he continued. I'm here because I still believe in art, in stories that challenge us, even if the people telling them are flawed. And guess what? That includes every person at this table. A burst of applause broke out. Scattered, unsure but real. Online, Twitter exploded. Oh, Film Fanatic 45, Mel, Gibson, just, body slammed, Whoopi. The View, Oh Truth. Hertzpod. I never thought. I'd say this was, but Mel is cooking cancel. Me next. Is he wrong, though? Whoopi tried to recover, chuckling dryly. Oh, we're playing dirty now, she asked. Mel responded calmly. No, I'm just done pretending that silence equals dignity. Whoopi's smile didn't reach her eyes. She had just taken a hit, one that sent shockwaves through the studio, but she wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Her voice cut the air like a blade. "So that's the game, huh?" she said, her tone sharpened. "Dig up one quote and suddenly you're the moral compass?" The audience held its breath. She turned toward the camera now, no longer addressing just Mel, but the millions watching. "Let's talk about what Mel won't say," she declared, pulling out a folded paper from her cue stack. "You want to own your past? Then own this," she read aloud. "You look like a fing pig in heat. And if you get raped by a pack of noni, it will be your fault." The studio froze. Gasps rang out. Someone in the audience shouted, "Whoa!" A producer could be seen off stage, visibly stiffening. "You said that to the mother of your child," Whoopi continued, her voice trembling now with righteous fury. "And you expect us to see you as the victim?" Mel didn't flinch, but the weight of the moment was undeniable. Even his fiercest defenders in the audience looked shaken. "So tell me, Mel," Whoopi snapped, "is this the comeback tour? Are you cashing in on the new redemption culture? Or is this just a performance for the conservative crowd that thinks yelling louder than the truth makes them innocent?" She leaned forward, seizing the silence. "How dare you come here and pretend you're the one being judged unfairly?" For a moment, it seemed she had him cornered. Mel leaned forward slowly, elbows on the table, face unreadable. "You're right," he said. The words surprised even Whoopi. "I said horrifying things. I was broken, I was drunk, I was filled with rage. And yes, I inflicted pain I can never take back." The room was tense. Whoopi narrowed her eyes, preparing to pounce, until Mel raised a finger. "But here's what you won't say, Whoopi, because it doesn't fit the narrative." He turned to the crowd, then to the camera. "I sought help. I spent years in therapy. I didn't just disappear. I stepped back because I had to. Because I wasn't fit to lead, create, or even speak. I lost friends, family, studios cut ties. I was exiled, and I didn't fight it, because they were right. There was a stillness. Now even the co-hosts sat motionless. But I didn't stay in exile. I worked. I built back trust. I produced films without my name on them. I mentored directors quietly. I supported charities anonymously. And I never asked to be forgiven publicly, because that's not how redemption works." He turned to Whoopi, his voice steady, intense. "You want to hold me to what I was in my worst moment? Fine, but then hold everyone here to the same standard." He scanned the table. "Joy, you've said racially insensitive jokes on air. Anna, you've mocked mental health. And Whoopi, you once said Roman Polanski didn't commit rape. So if we're going to talk about what disqualifies someone from sitting at this table, we'd better clear the whole panel." The audience gasped. One woman clapped, then another. A slow rising wave of applause began to swell. "Here's the part that really matters," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "not from weakness, but from truth. I have children. I've sat across from them and told them who I was and who I've worked to become. That matters more than any viral clip or trending hashtag. You don't have to like me, you don't have to believe in me. But you will not erase the work I've done just because it's easier to crucify than forgive." The air in the studio had transformed. Whoopi tried to respond, but stumbled. "But that doesn't," Mel cut in gently. "It does. Because what you just tried to do wasn't justice. It was theater." You could feel it now. A woman in the second row whispered, "He's actually making sense." Twitter caught fire again. "A real talk, Jake. Mel Gibson just hit the View with more honesty than I've seen in 5 years. Mel speaks. Morning, Maggie. Whoopi just tried to cancel a man who already cancelled himself. Respect to Mel for that." Culture Shock Live. This is not how they thought this interview would go. On screen, the other hosts were quiet, uncertain whether to interject or retreat. Whoopi adjusted her glasses, her demeanor suddenly colder, less emotional, more calculated. She'd tried moral outrage. Now it was time for strategy. "Okay, Mel," she began slowly, her tone laced with quiet smugness. "Let's move beyond redemption and accountability. Let's talk cinema, let's talk artistry. Since you're back on your high horse as a filmmaker, maybe you can walk us through something real." The other hosts perked up. "This was it, the trap. You directed?" "The Passion of the Christ," she continued, You claim it's one of the most historically grounded religious films ever made. So explain this. Why did you use Aramaic and Latin instead of Hebrew and Greek, the actual dominant languages of Judea at the time? And why depict Pontius Pilate as a sympathetic figure when most scholars agree he was a ruthless enforcer of Roman power? Boom. It wasn't just a question. It was a direct intellectual ambush crafted to humiliate. She leaned back, arms crossed, a victorious smirk settling in. Even Joy muttered, "Oof!" Ana Navarro sipped her coffee and looked away. She knew. This was a kill shot. Whoopi added a final twist of the knife. If you can't answer that with historical integrity and artistic justification, maybe it's time people realize your movies are just violent propaganda dressed up as spiritual cinema. The crowd began to murmur. A few eyebrows rose. Someone whispered, "He's done." Mel paused, blinking once, and then, with the calm of a veteran warrior, he leaned forward. "That's an excellent question, Whoopi," Mel said without blinking. His tone, unshaken, measured, surgical. "You're right. I made deliberate linguistic choices. Aramaic was the spoken language of the Jewish people in Judea at the time. Latin was used by the Roman elite. Hebrew was for temple rituals, and Greek, though widely spoken, wasn't appropriate for the spiritual gravity I wanted to portray in intimate religious conversations." He smiled slightly. It wasn't about accessibility. It was about reverence, he continued, locking eyes with the camera now. As for Pontius Pilate, yes, many scholars agree he was brutal, but others argue he was a conflicted man, politically, cornered between Caesar's demands and a boiling provincial rebellion. I chose to depict that tension, not to exonerate him, but to show how ordinary men, under the weight of cowardice, allow evil to triumph. The audience was dead silent. Then, Mel pulled out his own trap, and while we're on historical integrity, Whoopi, let's talk about The Color Purple. Whoopi froze. That film, your Oscar-nominated masterpiece, portrays Albert as a purely evil man, but Alice Walker herself said he was based on a real man who later apologized and changed. You chose to simplify the character for emotional impact. Was that propaganda or was it just storytelling? The tables had flipped. Hard. Mel continued, "Filmmaking is not a courtroom, it's not a documentary. It's emotional truth crafted through lens, light, and character. If you think any of us tell the whole truth on screen, then we've misunderstood the very nature of art." Mel calmly reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "This is from Alexander Solzhenitsyn," he said. "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between political parties, but right through every human heart." He looked back at Whoopi. "You tried to paint me as a man forever unworthy of thought, faith, or redemption. But that's not justice, that's vengeance, and it's exactly what corrupts movements built on truth." A long silence, then someone in the crowd yelled, "Preach!" and the room exploded into applause. For the first time in the segment, Whoopi Goldberg looked off balance. Her fingers nervously tapped the cue cards on her desk. Her smirk, once a symbol of dominance, had faded into a tight-lipped stare. Mel Gibson, composed and steady, had not only dismantled her ambush, but had turned her trap into a masterclass on faith, filmmaking, and redemption. And now every pair of eyes, on set, in the audience, and across millions of live streams, were locked on her. She tried to recover. "Well, Mel," she chuckled awkwardly, "you seem to have rehearsed that quite a bit. I mean, how convenient to carry around your next script like you were expecting a courtroom today." There it was, the deflection. Laughter from the other hosts was half-hearted. Even Joy Behar leaned back, watching Whoopi with wary eyes. Mel didn't flinch. "You say rehearsed," he replied calmly. "I say prepared. And in today's culture, when a single moment on television can define a man's character forever, preparation is survival." A few people in the audience nodded slowly. Whoopi tried to pivot again. "Look, we're just having a conversation here. I'm not here to attack anyone, but let's be honest. Your track record is controversial. People have a right to question your motives." The tone had changed. Gone was the confident inquisitor. In her place was a host scrambling to regain moral high ground. But the audience wasn't buying it. Mel leaned forward, his voice lower now, more intimate, more piercing. And I welcomed the conversation. I stood here and took every shot you had, but the moment I asked a question back, you tried to change the subject. He turned slightly, facing the audience directly. That's not dialogue. That's dominance disguised as virtue. A man in the crowd stood up and clapped once, then awkwardly sat back down, but the energy was shifting fast. Mel looked around the table, scanning the hosts before focusing back on Whoopi. You asked me about artistic responsibility. You asked me about redemption. But where was that concern when Roman Polanski was defended on this very stage? Boom, a gasp from the far right side of the audience. Mel continued, his voice unwavering. Where was this moral clarity when you downplayed sexual assault charges just because someone made good movies? Or when cancel culture came for others, and suddenly we all had to wait for the facts? Now it wasn't just an attack, it was a revelation. Even Sonny Hostin glanced sideways, clearly uncomfortable. Whoopi tried to interrupt. Now wait a minute. But Mel wasn't stopping. People don't need hosts who weaponize outrage like, say it's a segment. They need honesty, consistency, and yes, grace for those who have fallen and fought to rise again. He looked directly at her. You asked for redemption. I asked for truth. The change in the room was no longer subtle. There were murmurs before. Now there was momentum. Applause broke out. Not from everyone, but from enough that it rattled the stage. A cameraman even briefly shifted toward the clapping section before cutting back. The Twitter stream was exploding. A Voice of Reason TV. Whoopi's deflecting hard. Mel Gibson's wiping the floor with logic, grace, and straight-up facts. The View, Sarah on air. The silence from the other hosts is deafening. Mel just exposed years of selective outrage. Truth chaser. You don't have to like Mel Gibson to admit he's absolutely owning this moment. Producers in the control booth whispered into headsets. He's flipping the entire segment. Audience is off script. We're losing narrative. Whoopi tries one last defense. Listen, Mel, this isn't a trial, okay? Whoopi snapped, voice a touch higher now. You've had plenty of platforms. You're not some silenced victim. You're a millionaire actor. The crowd quieted again. Mel nodded slowly. You're right. I have resources, fame, opportunity. But that doesn't mean truth is a luxury. If anything, it means I have a greater responsibility to defend it. He leaned in, eyes locked. And if we only allow voices we already agree with to speak, what kind of view is that? Suddenly Mel reached into his coat pocket again. No, not another quote. A small wooden cross, smooth and worn from time. He held it in his hand. This was my father's, he said softly. He gave it to me the night The Passion premiered. Told me, never fear the crowd, fear silence when truth is needed most. He set it gently on the table in front of Whoopi. The room was so quiet, you could hear the buzzing of the studio. Lights. The camera cut to Whoopi, speechless, blinking slowly, hands folded tensely. One more push and she would crumble. The audience knew it, Twitter knew it, and Mel knew it. Because while Whoopi had come armed with headlines, sound bites, and pre-approved jabs, Mel had come armed with conviction. Whoopi Goldberg had one last card to play, and she knew it. With the cross sitting in front of her, the studio pulsing with silence, and Mel Gibson calmly waiting for her reply, she smirked, then rolled her eyes. You know what? She said, her voice rising with performative exhaustion. This is just classic right-wing redemption fantasy. A man messes up, disappears for a few years, then shows up with a speech and a cross, and suddenly he's a prophet. She chuckled, bitterly looking toward the audience for backup. I mean, come on, folks. Are we really going to pretend this is anything more than a scripted PR stunt? A few forced chuckles echoed, but they rang hollow. Desperation was showing, and everyone could feel it. You talk about truth, Mel, Whoopi continued, but this isn't a courtroom. This is The View. We have real conversations, real women, and we don't need a Hollywood savior showing up with dramatic monologues. She paused, scanning for support among her co-hosts, but they stayed quiet. Sonny Hostin's eyes were locked on the floor. Joy Behar pretended to shuffle papers. The isolation was setting in. Whoopi leaned back, trying to laugh it off. Look, I'm sure your fans will eat this up, but out here in the real world, none of this changes what people think about you. She shrugged dramatically. So, thanks for the sermon. But some of us live in reality. It was her final swing, a mix of sarcasm, dismissal, and emotional manipulation, meant to recast Mel's moral stand as nothing more than ego. Mel didn't move. He let the silence hang for a moment, long enough to make it heavy. Then slowly, he stood. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't perform, he simply told the truth. "You say this isn't a courtroom," Mel said, "but that's exactly the problem. Because in a courtroom, you need evidence, logic, consistency. You're held accountable for every claim, every accusation, every word." He turned toward Whoopi. "But here, you get to perform outrage, you get to interrupt, mock, twist the truth, and when you lose, you call it a PR stunt." A ripple of gasps flowed through the audience. Mel continued, his tone sharper now, cutting, but controlled. "I didn't come here to change your mind, Whoopi. I came here to show people that not everyone will back down when the mob gets loud. And when you dismiss truth as a script, you insult every person who's ever clawed their way back from failure, pain, or regret." The killshot Mel took a breath, his eyes locked on hers. "You once said on this show, we need to give people space to grow. But only when you approve of them, only when they say the right things, vote the right way, and apologize. The way you want." He leaned forward. "That's not grace, that's control. And people are done being controlled." The audience fell dead silent, and then Mel looked directly into the camera. "I may be flawed, I may be controversial, but I showed up, I answered your questions, I stood my ground." He pointed at the camera, not accusingly, but as if reaching through the screen. "So to every person watching this who's been shamed, silenced, or shut out, you're not alone. You don't need a host's permission to be forgiven." He stepped back, picked up the cross, and held it for a moment. Redemption isn't handed out by celebrities. It's lived, it's earned, and it doesn't need your applause. He set it back down gently. Mick dropped audience reactions. It started with a single clap, then another, then dozens, and then the whole room stood, a full, rising, uncontrollable, standing ovation erupted, clapping, whistling, even a few people shouting Mel's name. The camera panned across the stage, Whoopi frozen, staring forward, blinking rapidly. She reached for her coffee but missed the handle. Her hand trembled slightly. Her smirk was gone. There were no more comebacks, no final zinger, no laughter, just the sound of a studio erupting for the man she tried to bury. Cliffhanger. But that's when the real shock came next. As the applause thundered and the camera feed lingered on Mel, the director's voice in the control room crackled with panic. "Cut to commercial now! Now!" But it was too late. The camera had just caught something in the corner of the screen. A producer, clearly shaken, rushed a note card to Whoopi. She read it, froze, then whispered something to Joy. The audience didn't notice, but Twitter did a screen capture of Whoopi's face. Reading that card went viral instantly. Insider leaks. What just happened off-screen at The View? Something big is coming. Mel Gibson, our studio whistleblower. The segment wasn't supposed to go this way. Watch what's coming next, because the real shock wasn't what Mel said. It was what ABC was now forced to reveal. The applause eventually died down, but the atmosphere in the studio had changed forever. Whoopi Goldberg, once the unshakable queen of daytime dominance, now sat in silence. Arms folded, eyes distant, face flushed. No rebuttal, no final swing, no control. She didn't storm off, she didn't apologize, she simply faded. Joy Behar tried to shift the mood with a half-hearted, "Well, that was certainly spirited," but no one laughed. The camera briefly cut to Sonny Hostin, who simply mouthed, "Wow," and then Mel Gibson leaned forward. One last time. The final message. "You know," Mel said softly, "we live in a time where outrage is currency, where a mistake, whether it's yesterday or 20 years ago, is treated like a life sentence." The audience listened closely. He wasn't performing now, he was reflecting. "I'm not perfect, I've fallen, but falling doesn't define a man. What he does afterward does." He looked directly at the studio crowd and into the homes of millions watching. "We need to stop worshipping mockeries and start listening to each other again." A few audience members were wiping tears. Because when we lose truth, when we let media become a coliseum for character assassination, we lose ourselves. the final lesson. In the end, Mel said, standing once more, intelligence, merit, and truth always rise above arrogance and manipulation. He turned toward the co-hosts, not with anger but with clarity. You don't have to like me, you don't have to agree with me, but if you fear an honest conversation, then you are part of the problem. He tapped the table twice and gave a single nod. We need courage now more than ever. Courage to speak, courage to forgive, and courage to think for ourselves. The crowd stood again, not for controversy, for conviction. Audience reactions, post-show explosion. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Political pulse. Mel Gibson just flipped the view upside down. That was a masterclass in composure. And truth. On mic drop moment. Our call-out culture. Whoopi tried to cancel him. Mel gave her a lesson in grace and grit. Never seen anything like it. Freedom voices. It's not about Mel. It's about truth. And he just exposed how broken our media really is. Clips circulated faster than they could be taken down. One 43-second clip of Mel saying falling doesn't define a man was shared 4 million times in 2 hours. Call to action, and now, it's your turn. Do you believe in second chances? Was this a wake-up call for the media or just another viral moment? Do you think justice was served? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe in standing up for truth, no matter how unpopular it may be, share this video. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Let's hold the powerful accountable, together. Because the culture war isn't won in headlines. It's won in moments of truth. The end, or is it?